use cases for you to understand basically what are we talking about in terms of business processes and human interactions and vis-a-vis applications. Then I'll talk about the capabilities that the Ensemble product set brings to you in terms of involving human beings into workflow. I'll go ahead to give you a demonstration of the technology, which if you have an installation of Ensemble, you'll be able to do yourself after this session. And then I'll talk about how do you take this human workflow engine and embed this within your application. And that's all about the workflow API. So I'll describe what API is available for workflow so that you could potentially embed that within your application. And then at the end of this, I'll be open to questions and answers. Okay, so let's start off by looking at why do we need human decisions in workflow? And the answer, I think, is pretty straightforward, really. The answer is because you can't really fully automate all processes. You know, there are many processes that require human intervention. And broadly speaking, we're looking at two different types of usages of human interaction. The first one is an application that actually drives the human action. So an application that tells the individual what to do and updates its state based on what that individual's done. So examples of that might be, for example, a delivery company. Delivery person goes to a warehouse, they pick up a truck, they have a consignment within the truck, and then it guides them around all the different addresses that they need to take the items within the truck to. Okay, so that's an example of such an application. Another example would be a help desk. You know, you call a help desk such as the WRC. The WRC then will look at the issue, try to replicate it. They will get development involved if need be, and that will lead to a conclusion of the issue you might be encountering. So that's an application as well that drives the human action. Another example would be decision support in healthcare, but you know, there's a myriad of examples of applications that do this type of thing. A slightly different type of use case is where you're dealing with exceptions. So fraud detection, for example, and we discussed this earlier today in one of the keynotes really. Fraud detection is looking at transactions going across different financial institutions. In the vast majority of cases, these transactions are fine. But in some instances, these transactions might be highlighted. They might need human intervention. So a human being might have to go into system to try to figure out whether that transaction's been valid or not. And in fact, one of these things actually happened to me this morning whereby I got a call from MasterCard. I'm out of my country of origin. I placed a transaction in the hotel as it happens, and they thought it might be a fraudulent case, you know. So that's another example of where a human being might have to get involved in order to call the individual to try to figure out what's going on. If you work in the world of healthcare and you're using Ensemble or indeed any integration engine to link different applications together, one of the issues you might come across every now and again is malformed messages. You have messages flowing between different systems, like for example your laboratory system and some type of clinical system. If that message is malformed in some way, so it might have a bit of data missing, or perhaps it might be corrupt, those sort of messages typically get sent through to individuals to actually look at the content of the message to try to rectify the situation, which might mean going back to the source system and reissuing the message or fixing the message within the integration engine in order to be able to resend it. Another example of exceptional behavior is this area called master patient index, which I'm going to describe in a few minutes, where you do need data quality people to go in order to make decisions on whether records should be linked or not. So on top of that, not all processes are optimal. So you might have resourcing issues. There might be a certain number of developers, a certain number of testers within the organization, but you might have the wrong mix of individuals. It might be that you have bottlenecks and dead ends within your business processes. It might also be that you want to look at good performance and not so good performance. And in order to be able to do this, analysis is critical. So having implemented a business process, if you want to improve that business process, you need to be able to measure that business process as well. So let's go back to basics now to understand what does the term workflow mean. So this is a definition that comes out of Wikipedia. You could probably read it quicker than I can actually say it. It's quite a lengthy description, but I'd highlight some of the aspects of workflow over there. Orchestrated and repeated patterns of business activity, declared as work of a person or group or one or more simple or complex mechanisms. So broadly speaking, this is talking about human interaction, so people doing things, but also integration to back-end systems and processing against those back-end systems as well. And when we start to look at the terminology itself, we'll see that people sometimes refer to it as business process management. So the question, I guess, one would ask oneself is there a difference? Is a workflow the same as a business process? Are they different things? And it really all depends on who you actually ask. Workflow as a term dates back to the early 20th century with people like Taylor and Gantt, the latter of which is particularly well known for Gantt charts that many of you might be familiar with in project management. And the work of Taylor and Gantt was all about manufacturing and engineering and how to optimize processes within those environments. Pre-computer era, clearly. So this workflow activity was all about human activities and how to improve those human activities to be able to manufacture more efficiently, to engineer more efficiently, and so on. Business process management came in later to include integration to back-end systems and automation. But in essence, I mean, both of these terminologies, business process management and workflow, are typically used interchangeably. Okay, so let's start to look now at a few sample use cases. Okay, so the first is parcel delivery. So you have a parcel delivery person goes to a warehouse, they pick up a truck, the truck has a consignment within it, they might have an app on a mobile device that will download the manifest for the truck. It also might download as well the addresses for where to deliver these items, and also even traffic conditions, so to figure out how to go about delivering all these items. So the delivery person then will check to make sure that the materials match the manifest, and they'll go away and deliver all the items. And then ultimately, they'll come back to the warehouse with items which they couldn't, for whatever reason, deliver, and then they'll have to deal with those. And this looks a little bit like this in terms of a flow chart, you know. We start off by collecting data, and this data collection might be the items to be delivered and the locations of delivery and traffic conditions and so on. Then we check consignment, so this is the individual making sure that they got the right material. And then we go through this while loop over here to deliver items. So they'll go through to the different addresses. So what does that while loop look like? If I drill down into that, it looks as follows. The driver will attempt to delivery, so knocks on the door, there might be somebody over there. If there isn't somebody over there, there might be that the individual in the house specified an alternative delivery, which might be with a particular neighbor, might be behind the trash, for example, or somewhere in the drive and so on, and that'll be the alternative delivery over here. And if all that happens fine, then the back-end system gets updated. So this is integration through to the back-end system to say this item was delivered at this date and time, and a signature was taken from the recipient and so on. And we carry on doing these activities over here in a loop until we'll get to the end of it. Then we go back to the warehouse and we deal with outstanding, so deal with items that we couldn't possibly deliver. Now, for those of you familiar with Ensemble, you might recognize this over here as being business process language, or BPL. And this is the mechanism used in Ensemble in order to define business processes. These bubbles over here are known as activities. The main activity is called a call activity, which you can see over here. And the call activity in this business process serves two purposes. The first purpose, collect data, for example, is to grab data from a back-end system. So this is all about orchestration and integration through to back-end systems, whereas this check consignment call over here and this attempt delivery call are actually invoking human action. They're asking the driver to go in and make sure that he's got the right items to be delivered, and also to attempt the delivery, to ensure that, that somebody's over there and to try to deliver this item. So what we can see over here within business process language, which we'll see in software in a few minutes, is the fact that there's a seamless interface through orchestration, integration to back-end systems, and also involving human beings. So from a development perspective and also from a business process perspective, human interaction and machine interaction is dealt with in exactly the same way. So that's one use case, and this is an example of an application that will drive a human being with a mobile device, for example, doing their job. Another example, which is slightly different, is dealing with exceptions. So an example of which is an enterprise master patient index. An enterprise master patient index in the world of healthcare is fundamentally a system that holds patient identity. So I have patient data in a variety of different systems, my laboratory system, my hospital systems. That patient data in terms of demographic information, addresses, names, dates of birth, might be different for a variety of reasons. It could be that people have got married and they've changed their surname. It could be that data was input incorrectly. Okay? It could be that data is out of date. So I might have updated my address in this system, but not this system over here. Now, the purpose of an enterprise master patient index is to link these different demographic data sets in order to create a common identity across these different systems. So where there's a strong match between data in a variety of different systems, then the enterprise master patient index will automatically link the data. In cases where there isn't a match at all, so Mark Macias and John Smith, then it simply doesn't link them. And anywhere in between, specified by thresholds, it will put it into a work list where people in data quality will need to go in and make checks on the data. So they have to go in and look at the source systems, perhaps make phone calls, send emails to find out whether John Smith and Jonathan Smith are indeed the same person. Okay, so that's the human intervention dealing with the exceptions. An example of an enterprise master patient index is an InterSystems product called the HealthShare Patient Index, does exactly this. So the workflow for that, as simplified, would look as follows. We'd start off by sending the data to the data quality team, and the data would be pairs or records appearing across different systems, and then the data quality team would need to take action. They'd either need to link the records, they need to unlink the records if the records weren't actually relating to the same person, or potentially if the two records appeared in the same system, okay, that's what we call a duplicate, okay? And if the system supports it, you can send a message to the system to merge these two records together into one. So again, this is an example of human interaction over here, send to data quality team, which requires a response from the team. And this over here, request a source merge, is an example of integrating through to a backend system to send a message to ask for a merge to occur between two different records. The third example appears in the standard Ensemble installation. It's a production called demo.workflow.production. It appears in the ends demo namespace. This is part of a standard install, so you should be able to look at this yourselves as well. And this is a very simple business process. This has two sets of users. You have developers and you have testing department. So a customer has bought a product from a particular company. They find a fault in the product and they phone the product support line. Then that's sent through to development. Development will attempt to fix that issue, and then testing team will ensure that that's been fixed. So what does that look like? One big while loop, which then when you drill down into it, starts off by notifying the development team, waiting for them to respond, then figuring out whether it's been fixed or not. It could be the development team don't think it's a problem, in which case it goes down here. If they fixed it, then it goes through to notify testing. So this requires somebody within the testing team to make sure that it's been fixed properly. And if it's been fixed properly, then it'll go down this path over here. If it hasn't, then it'll go down here, and it'll just go around the while loop again. So it'll be sent through to development again, so on and so forth. Okay, so these are 3 different use cases. Now let's look at Ensemble and try to understand how this all fits together. So Ensemble, as many of you will know, is an integration engine which has more capabilities than purely integration. So we have business services that receive requests from the outside world. The business processes then are where we implement business process management. Okay, and within business process management, we have a transformation engine, which allows you to transform messages. We have a rules engine. We also have a workflow engine, which is essentially how you incorporate human action within that. And all these messages flowing around between these different components are ultimately stored in a message warehouse, which is the underlying cache database. So, as we've seen already by looking at the business processes I've shown you for the different use cases, human interaction is automatically integrated within the business process. We don't have business processes for orchestration and integration, and for human interaction, it all falls into exactly the same business process management. It's also automatically integrated with composite applications by virtue of the fact that we have a very rich set of APIs, which I'm going to be describing a little bit later. There's also comprehensive task distributions in terms of where to send these tasks to, and the strategy for doing that is customizable, and we'll look at that again. And management is all done through a web browser, and it's easy to customize the behavior of the workflow engine as well. So a few key concepts in terms of workflow. The first is the workflow role. The workflow role is either generated programmatically or can be generated automatically as well within an Ensemble production, or more typically it's created manually. And a workflow role typically mimics a department or a job function. So you might have, for example, a role for development in our scenario beforehand, a role for testing, and so on. Now, within those roles, you'll have one or more users. Now, the workflow users need to be first defined as Ensemble or cache users. Ensemble or cache being the same thing. And then these users then need to have a name, which will be exactly the same as the Ensemble or cache account name. They can be given a descriptive name, which will be a full name, and you can define as well whether they're active or not, so whether they're switched on or switched off within a particular role. The third section of this is the workflow task. So a task is something that you send through to a role, which is then assumed by a particular user within that role, and that's a bit of work that they need to do. So in our example before of the help desk, that bit of work for the developer would be to go in and try to figure out whether there really is an issue with the product or not. If there is an issue, then go ahead and fix it. And the workflow engine oversees the task distribution and makes sure that a task response is sent through to the caller, which is typically a business process. So diagrammatically, we have workflow operations, which are specialist business operations within Ensemble, which are underpinned by a workflow role. So there's a relationship between the name of the business operation and the name of the role. They're essentially the same thing. And let's look at now the life cycle of a task. A business process will send a task request to a workflow operation. The workflow operation then implements the workflow engine. It will create a task for an appropriate workflow role, which is the name of the business operation. Then the workflow engine will distribute the task amongst the workflow users using a number of different strategies, which I'm going to describe in a couple of minutes. And then the workflow user within that role is able to acquire a task and complete a task. And having done that, then the workflow engine will send a task response to the calling host, which is a business process. So the sort of task distributions that we can implement are as follows. First come, first served. So I send the task to development. I'm a member of the development role. I log in. I look at the tasks available. I accept that task, and I complete it. That's first come, first served. But alternatively, you can assign tasks by job title. They can be assigned by name. You can assign them as well by user-defined ranking. So you can specify the ranking of a particular user within a role and specify that I want to send these tasks to the highest ranked individuals within that role. You can even assign them by their current workload. So you can look at people and how many tasks they're working on at any given point in time. So active tasks, and send tasks to individuals that don't have as many active tasks as other people. And finally, you can customize all this. So if you want to create your own strategy in terms of how the tasks get distributed, you can do that. Okay, so let's look at a demonstration of the product now. So what I'm going to demonstrate over here is something that if you have an Ensemble license, you can have access to. It appears within the Ensemble namespace, which is where we keep all the different demonstrations. It's a production called demo.workflow.production. It's an implementation of the help desk use case, which I showed you before. Relatively simple. You have developers, you have testing, and let's take a look at this. So let me just open up an instance of Ensemble. Now this is the production, okay? Pretty simple production. The main things in these productions are the operations, and you can see the operations themselves have got names like demo development and demo testing. These are underpinned by roles called demo development and demo testing. If I click on one of these, I'll see that this business operation is an instance of enslib.workflow.operation. So it's a specialist type of business operation. Another thing I'd like to show you as well, I'd like to point out really, is the fact that there's a checkbox over here that says auto create role, and it's checked to be true. And what that does is, if I didn't have a role called demo development under the covers, then it will automatically create one for me. As it happens, I've created a role called demo development, and I've created a number of users within that. But if I didn't have that, it would automatically create it for me, which goes back to my original point, which is you can create roles programmatically through an API. You can do them automatically by clicking on this a button over here, a checkbox rather, or I could go in through the management portal and through the UI, create the role, give it a name, and assign users to that role and so on. Okay, so where most of the action's taking place really is the business process, the help desk business process. If I open up the business process associated to that, this is BPL, and as we saw before in the PowerPoint, you have a while loop. I can drill into this while loop, and this is the implementation of the business process. We start off by notifying development. We then wait for development to come back, and then we figure out whether it's been fixed or not. If it has been fixed, then we go back down here, and we notify the testing department. We wait for them to come back. If it's been corrected, then we assign it to be resolved, and that's the end of that while loop. If that's not the case, then it goes down the different path over here, and it will just go around again until ultimately it gets fixed. And what does this look like at a very kind of high level? If I click on this call activity, you can see this call activity has got a target of demo-development, which is the business operation. It's a specialist business operation, which implements the workflow engine. And it sends a particular type of message called an Enslib workflow task request, which is the workflow task. So that's what we're doing. We're sending a task request. Eventually, somebody will pick that up and act upon it and generate a task response. So let's see how that works. So in order to test that, I'm going to use the testing service within Ensemble. So I'm going to click on this process, click on actions, and then hit the test button. And within this test button, I'm going to say who reported the issue, and that's going to be me. If I can spell my own surname names. And then I'm going to put in the problem. So widget should be blue, not red. Okay, so a nice and trivial problem. So I'm going to invoke the testing service. And what that does now is it generates a message through to development. So if I go through to the message viewer and I look at the trace for the last possible message, which is the one that's been generated, I can see now that a message is sent from the testing service to the business process, and that's this one over here. And you can see it's reported by Mark Macias, which widget should be blue, not red. And then a message, which is a task request, gets sent through to demo development. Okay? So that's then waiting for somebody to pick that task up. So I'm going to go in now through a different browser instance, and I'm going to go and log in as somebody within the development team. And that individual within, I'm going to log out first, individual within the development team is called Dev1. So Dev1 is a user within the development team. And if I look at the workflow portal, which is out-of-the-box user interface with Ensemble, which can be customized, you can see that this user over here has a task available to them. But you can see that this task over here has been assigned to, well, it's been sent through to the demo development role, as we would expect, but hasn't been assigned to anybody because nobody's picked it up yet. So if I want to pick this up, what I do is I select the task, I accept the task, and as soon as I accept it, you can see that it's been assigned to myself as Dev1. Then I can do several things. I can go ahead and fix the issue, well, triage it, and then fix it. Or I might decide that I want to relinquish it. And if I relinquish it, what it does, it just sends it back through to the pool, and now it's not assigned to anybody again. So somebody else could now go ahead and pick that task up. But what I'm going to do over here is I'm going to pick that task up, and I'm going to fix the problem very, very quickly because it's a really simple software issue. And I'm going to say, problem's been fixed. And then I'm going to say, correct it. And now if I go back to the message trace, we'll see what's happened. So if I refresh the message trace, I can see now that the request sent through the development gets a response, and then a message is sent through to demo testing. So now it's been sent through to the testing department, waiting for somebody within the testing role to pick that up and test it and figure out whether it's been fixed or not. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through to the same environment over here, but this time log in as somebody within the testing team, imaginatively called Test1. So Test1's a tester, and when they go to the workflow portal, again, they see a task appearing within their workflow portal that is being sent through to demo testing, and then they can accept it. And having tested it, they can say it's been corrected, then the task is complete. And when I go back to the message trace and refresh it, that completes the process. So message is sent through to development respond to it, then the message is sent through to testing respond to it, and an overall response is sent through. So what we see over here really is that it's seamless, whether you're integrating through to backend systems, which more people are familiar with within the world of Ensemble, or invoking human action, it's done in exactly the same kind of way. So let's talk about the next aspect over here, which is how do we go about incorporating this within your application? So say you have your own application and you want to be able to use the workflow engine within Ensemble. You can do that by virtue of the fact there's a very rich set of APIs, the main class of which is enslib.workflow.engine. This has been used extensively by many customers in the last few years. Now, I'll hasten to add that this functionality per se is not new within the product. This has been in Ensemble for a large number of years. But it's only in the last few years that many customers, and I'll give you a good example later, have started to incorporate this within their application, potentially using completely different user interface technology, business logic, and so on. So within the API, there's a number of methods. This is a subset of them. So you have the ability to assign a task to a user, to complete a task, to find the least busy user within the system. So all of this is exposed within an API, so you can programmatically generate roles, generate users, assign the users to the roles, send tasks to specific roles, perhaps even to specific users on the basis that they're the least busy within the organization, and so on. But on top of that, there's also a rich set of methods that do collection of metrics. So BAM over here, which is a prefix for all these methods, stands for business activity monitoring. And this is all about gathering metrics. Now, why do we gather metrics? Because essentially we collect this data through the Ensemble analytics, which is deep sea essentially. You can start to generate dashboards where you look at, for example, the active load within a role, the active tasks. You can start to look at the users within each roles and how many tasks they have. You can start to look at bottlenecks within your business process. So it could be the certain sections of your business processes taking an inordinate amount of time. In order to be able to optimize that, you need to be able to measure that, and these methods give you the mechanism to be able to do that in conjunction with dashboards. There's also a number of queries and other methods as well, so things like list task for a role, list task for a user, which are all available within the system. Okay, so the richness of this is that you can incorporate human interaction within the application by using these APIs. So in summary, I mean, workflow typically involves human decisions, whether it's a core part of the application, so the application drives the human interaction, or the application actually sends exceptions through to the user, so they've got to deal with exceptions like malformed messages, master patient index, and so on. We've also seen that Ensemble provides a seamless environment, so there's no distinction between automation and human interaction within business process language. It's all dealt with in exactly the same way. So from a development perspective, and also from a viewing perspective of the business process, it's much easier to work with. And we've also seen that there's a comprehensive API available within the system. So question, I guess, is where to next? So within the Solutions Developer Conference, if you want to have a detailed this technical discussion, a chap called James McKeith, who's one of the developers within the Ensemble team, is available in the developer zone. I'll be available as well, either in person or through the Slack application, if you have that as well. And you can also engage with the product manager for Ensemble, David Lovelock. There's also... Excellent. Okay, so excellent. Thank you very much. And there's huge amount of documentation in Ensemble. There's also a lot of information on the API as well, which I've described over there. And if you have a copy of Ensemble, I'd urge you to look at the help desk sample, which is the demo I just gave you over there. There's also a good example of a customer that's implemented this capability within the application. There's going to be a couple of sessions tomorrow and Wednesday, both of them 11, going to be given by a guest speaker from a company called Northgate. Northgate are one of our application partners in the UK. They've done some really, really exciting work with taking Ensemble as a workflow and integration engine, and with a larger stack of different technologies in order to deliver a regional police application within the UK. So they deliver this through to thousands of connected users, and they make extensive use of the workflow API in order to automate the police business. So this is all about people reporting crimes, going to investigate crimes, all underpinned by the Ensemble workflow and integration capability. So I'd ask you to, if you're interested in finding out a bit more about the technical detail of how this can be used in real life, please attend one of these sessions. Rely on your sales engineer as well. So if you want to kind of explore this further, your sales engineer will be more than happy to help you to do that. The InterSystems developer community as well, community.intersystems.com. Quick show of hands, how many have looked at that? Worked with that? So a few years, so I'd urge the rest of you to look at that. Some very, very interesting resources within that. Lots of sharing of code and information and education and so on. And like all the other sessions, the material for this will be available in our website in this URL over here. So at the end of this session, if you could please provide feedback with the Summit application, that'd be great. But that's really all I wanted to cover. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to take them. Okay, question back there. So just 1 second, please, for the microphone. Thanks.
From within this tool, can you call web services?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
From within your workflow engine, can you call a web service?
Yeah, absolutely. You can do it both ways. So, for example, the Northgate case I was talking about, we're going to give a presentation tomorrow and the day after. It's the workflow API is actually exposed as a web service. So it's invoked as a web service. But I guess your question is, can you invoke a web service the other way around? And the answer is yes, you can definitely do that.
And is that Northgate demo you're going to be giving, utilize that type of architecture?
Sorry?
Are you actually, is Northgate going, sorry about that, is Northgate actually going to, the Northgate demo actually going to, show how to call the service?
Well, the Northgate presentation will not include a demonstration of it, but they'll be more than happy to describe how they've done it.
Okay.
Yes. Thanks. Anybody else? Questions?
You mentioned that some people are just entirely replacing the workflow inbox. Can you give examples of how they're doing that? Are they just installing services that they call out and to get at the items?
Sorry, can you switch off the volume, up the volume a little bit? I can't.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that. Is that a little better? Yeah. You mentioned that some people were just using a different UI for processing their workflow items. Can you share a little more detail about how they're making that happen?
Yeah. So that for example, Northgate have done exactly that. Yeah, they've done exactly that. So the richness of the API is such that I can do things like, for example, log in to Ensemble as you'd expect, and then log in as a particular workflow user and try to identify what tasks are available to that workflow user, what's the status of those tasks are, and that's essentially the way the Northgate application would work. And so the user interface I showed you over here in terms of tasks and so on is straight out of the box Ensemble. That can be customized in itself. So the forms that you saw over there, which are very, very simplistic, really, can be written with HTML and so on, so they can be given a particular look and feel with cascading style sheets and so on. That'd be one way to do it, but you could also interface through to that through an API and then build the UI and the technology of your choice. Does that answer your question? Okay, thanks.
If you're interested in the Northgate application, it's actually called Many Data Sources, One Application. And I think it's at 11 tomorrow.
Yeah,
and also
that's right. So if you look at this slide over here, Many Data Sources, One Application, Tuesday, Wednesday, in this place, Okay, so thank you very much. I hope you find it of interest. And as I said, if you want to find out more, real life application tomorrow, Wednesday, 11 o'clock. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thanks. Thank you.